Hello and welcome. My name is Elizabeth Flores. I am a program manager with Michigan Department of Education, Resource for Deaf, Hard of Hearing, and I want to say thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. I hope that you have been receiving a lot of information recently regarding our Lead K Michigan work, from language milestones to the parent resource website to assessment tools. All of this work came out of the efforts of our Lead K Advisory Committee and our invested partners who spent so much time and effort in bringing the work to where we are today. So I'm very grateful to those folks as well. Today, we are here to talk about assessment data collection procedures. So again, thank you very much for being here. We are grateful for your partnership. I am now going to pass it over to Sarah Sybil, DHH Education Consultant, to go ahead and begin the presentation. Sarah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hi, this is Sarah. Well, the Lead K Advisory Committee has recommended 11 assessments to track, to monitor, and evaluate both the receptive and expressive language development of children who are deaf or hard of hearing, age 5 and younger. We're here today talking about language assessments, so we want to remind you about the work of the Lead K Advisory Committee and the recommended assessments. The assessments are listed on your screen, and this collection of recommended assessments allows teams multiple perspectives when looking at language. You may notice by the assessment names here that some are specific to the language of ASL, while others are specific to the language of English. Additionally, some assessments are appropriate for the administration and assessment of either language. Likewise, there are some assessments here that would be most appropriate for our earliest communicators or those who are deaf with disabilities. The Michigan language in the legislation notes that teams shall use any of the recommended assessments or any other assessments used to assess the development of children with disabilities as required by federal law. Again, this is for children who are deaf or hard of hearing, ages 5 or younger. And this applies to all children who are deaf or hard of hearing, regardless of how they're receiving services. We want to emphasize that all children should be assessed using assessments that are most appropriate fit for their developmental needs, and at intervals that most effectively support them in their development and their teams in providing interventions. This allows for an individualized approach to assessments. The legislation does not explicitly frame the who, the what, the when, or even how often these assessments should be administered. Educational teams should consider the individual needs and development of each child to make these decisions. Decisions related to which assessments to use with the child, when to use them, and how often to use them. Again, these decisions rest with each educational team. Our current capabilities allow for assessment data from 7 of the 11 recommended assessments to inform the first annual report. Those assessments are listed here on the screen. During this year 1, the annual report will include a detailed analysis and summary of outcomes from this subset of 7 assessments. It's important to note that these assessments are in no way indicative of a list of preferred assessments. Building a system to collect, to track, and analyze data takes planning and time, but we've heard you and we've adjusted our plans to accelerate our data collection activities. While these 7 recommended assessments will inform the annual report for this first year, all assessment data from each of the 11 recommended assessments can be submitted to our partners at the Early Language Outcomes Lab. This will provide the groundwork for future years' data collection and give us a more complete look at what assessments are being used across our state and their frequency of use. So how will we collect the data? I'd like to invite Elizabeth to share about our collection process and partnership.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Elizabeth. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is a partnership, and we are very grateful for your partnership. This is a new effort for Michigan. This is the first time ever that we will be collecting data on children who are deaf or hard of hearing and their language development. This is going to inform our practice, it's going to help us identify needs, and it's going to hopefully help us guide decisions for the future. This is a very exciting time. But again, this is a new effort. We want to be clear that the submission of child level assessment data is voluntary. We very much value your collaboration and your partnership in this work. We will be creating a report as required by the legislation, and that report will be informed by the data that is submitted. So again, we truly appreciate your collaboration, and we hope that you will be able to contribute to this work. And now I am very excited to introduce and welcome Dr. Allison Setti of the Early Language Outcomes, or ELO, lab at the University of Colorado Boulder. Dr. Setti is an audiologist, a speech language pathologist, and the director of the ELO lab. Dr. Setti and her team at ELO partner with several states and programs in this work, in the collection and analysis of language outcomes data for children who are deaf or hard of hearing, and we're very excited to have her partnership. And now I'm going to say, Allison, please take it away. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and hello to you watching this recording, and thank you so much for joining me today. Hope your day is going well. I'm going to start off today's session with talking a little bit about the benefits of assessing language outcomes. That's something that you're probably already aware of, hence why you're watching this presentation. But this might be a slide that you want to come back to as you talk to your families about the assessment process. Some of the benefits that will be specific to their child and family is that by doing assessment, you'll be able to identify the child's communication strengths and challenges. This then allows you to identify delays in a timely fashion. As you do the assessment over time, you'll be able to objectively monitor the child's progress. So in other words, not just to know that, oh, the child has gained skills since the last time we considered this, but how much gain have they made? Have they made 6 months progress if 6 months has passed? This is what formal assessments will be able to tell you. And getting this information will help guide your intervention planning. And as you're making important decisions about the child's educational program and their communication plan, you'll have data to help drive those decisions and inform those decisions. Some other benefits are related to the data collection efforts statewide. So what we just talked about were some benefits to an individual child and an individual family. But there's additional benefits that are gained by collecting data across the state, as Michigan is doing. It supports program evaluation and program accountability. And by looking at a large group of children, we'll be able to identify trends and also gaps that aren't always apparent in one person's caseload or even in one individual program. Identifying these gaps will help inform agencies about what topics are needed for personnel preparation. Another benefit of collecting the data statewide is that it will demonstrate both effectiveness and needs to funders and policymakers. Those are two different sides of the coin. So regardless of whether you're assessing a child whose language is progressing well, that will feed into the effectiveness piece, or a child who's struggling more with language development will feed into the needs piece. So funders are looking to support programs that are both effective, but also programs that do need resources. So regardless of how well a given child is progressing in the language domain, their assessment information will be important. Having this data collected at a population-wide level and having a large group of children on whom we have assessment results is going to give Michigan the opportunity to examine a variety of questions that would be of interest to individual practitioners and to agencies. You'll be able to think about questions such as, how are children doing who are using cochlear implants relative to those using hearing aids? How are children identified earlier or in intervention earlier? How are their language outcomes progressing relative to children who are identified or in intervention later? And other questions that might be of interest to you. An additional benefit of collecting outcomes statewide is that it will allow Michigan to meet both federal and state mandates. So federally, HRSA is the agency that supports the Michigan Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Program, or their EDI program. Traditionally, HRSA has tasked EDI with monitoring newborn hearing screening, identification of hearing differences, and entry into early intervention. For the first time this grant period, HRSA is also requiring EDI programs to collect language outcomes on children who are deaf or hard of hearing from birth up to age 3. Your voluntary participation in submitting data will help the EDI program to meet that requirement. Similarly, the state of Michigan also has a mandate about language outcome collection. This is through the Lead K bill, or Public Act 256, which stipulates that the Michigan Department of Education must report on language outcome data on children who are deaf or hard of hearing up to age 5 in the state of Michigan. Again, your voluntary participation will help the Department of Education meet that state mandate. Let's get into the specifics about the data collection process. First of all, who's eligible? What children? It would be all children who are deaf or hard of hearing from 1 month of age up to 5 years, 11 months of age. This is going to include children who have unilateral or bilateral hearing differences, whether they're conductive, sensory neural, mixed, any level of hearing, moderate, slight, profound. And as Sarah mentioned in the beginning, we have instruments on the list that are appropriate for children who have multiple disabilities, who may be low verbal, nonverbal, or developing their language very slowly. So both children who are deaf, hard of hearing only, and those who have additional conditions or special needs will also be included. How often would you be doing the assessment? As Sarah mentioned, this is a decision that will rest with each of the educational teams. I want to give you some ideas of what some of the other programs are doing in the states that are partnering with us, just as some food for thought as you're thinking about the frequency schedule for your program. Most of the programs we partner with do the assessment every 6 months. Some of those programs stop the assessment at age 3, but other programs, like in Michigan, will be assessing children up to age 5. In that 3 to 5 period, some programs have chosen to continue with the 6-month assessment, whereas others have decided to switch to an annual schedule during those preschool years. But again, it's what's best for the child and the family, and would be up to the individual educational team. What about the timing of the assessment? So not how often is it done, but actually like when is it done? Most of the programs that we're partnering with plan to do the assessment shortly before an IFSP or IEP meeting. Also, they make a big effort to do an assessment, sometimes more even a battery, as the child is transitioning from Part C to Part B. So in part of that transition process. In both of these instances, it allows the practitioner to come to the table with the current levels of the child. Other programs, though, rather than planning the assessment around a particular meeting, do the assessment at specific age levels. So in other words, they might choose to do the assessment when the child is 6 months old, 12 months old, 18 months old, etc. And yet other programs choose to assess all their children in a specific month of the year. So rather than trying to center it around a specific age or a specific meeting, sometimes which can be difficult to keep track of, especially with large caseloads, they choose 1 or 2 months of the year and assess all the children during those months. But again, it's whatever best meets the needs of the child and family and what your educational team has determined is most appropriate. Let's talk about the steps in the data submission process. I'm first going to just overview the steps, and then we're going to talk about each of them in more detail. Step 1 is to inform the family about Michigan's language outcomes data collection efforts. If the family is agreeable to having their child's results shared with the agencies, next step is to have the family sign a release of information form. All of the forms that we're going to be talking about today are on the website where you accessed this recording. Next step is to fill out a data submission form, which we're going to look at in detail in a moment. Complete 1 or more of the language assessments from those 11 that were recommended by the Lead K Advisory Board. And then, once everything's completed, you'll upload the forms, the completed forms, to a shared drive, organize them in a folder. I'll show you the organizational structure in a moment, and share that folder with us, ELO, at colorado.edu. And then, to let us know that you've put something in the folder, you'll send us a quick email with a link to get to that folder. So let's go back to step 1, discussing sharing information with families about the data collection effort in the state of Michigan. Please share the letter that is available at the website where you access this recording. It's the assessment data letter to parents. It explains the value of objective assessments in general, and also the added value of sharing their child's language results with the various Michigan agencies. You can also share with families the points that we kicked off on today's recording, those benefits of assessing language outcomes. And then I want to make you aware of an additional resource that I particularly like sharing with families about assessment. It's called 5 Reasons to Say Yes to Assessment. It was developed by Hands and Voices in partnership with our team at CU Boulder. So it's a informational flyer that was developed by parents for parents, specific to the value of assessment for children deaf or hard of hearing in that early period, that birth to 5 period. It's available in both English and Spanish, and I'd encourage you to take a quick look at it, see if it's something you would find useful, and if so, print it off and share it with your families. Some additional information to share with the family about the data collection process is that their child's results will only be shared with authorized programs whose job and mission it is to support children who are deaf or hard of hearing. Sharing their child's information will help these programs to understand what's working, what needs improvement, and when the agencies do know where children are succeeding and where they might need more support, they can create stronger and more effective intervention and education programs for all children in the state. So that was step 1, letting parents know about the assessment data submission process and this opportunity. If the family is agreeable to sharing their child's results with the agencies, we're going to move on to step 2, which is having the family sign the release of information form. This is a fillable PDF. It can be filled out on your computer or tablet. The signature box will be a certified signature if you do it that way, or if you wish, feel free to print it out and fill this out by hand. I'll just highlight that in the middle of the form are 4 bullet points, and these are the agencies that the child's language results will be shared with. So it's the Michigan Department of Education, Resource for Deaf, Hard of Hearing, our lab, the Early Language Outcomes Lab at the University of Colorado Boulder, the child's Part C or Part B educational agency, if they are associated with one of those agencies, and Michigan's Early Hearing Detection and Intervention Program, or Michigan EDI. Third point on our data submission process is completing the data submission form. We're going to look at this in some detail, But just as a quick overview, it also is a fillable PDF, so it can be completed on your computer or laptop, or if you choose, feel free to print it and fill it out by hand. When you complete the form, you'll be doing so based on any records you have for the child and your knowledge of the child and family. The better you know the child and family, the longer you've worked with them, the more you'll be able to fill this out independently. If it's a family that's new to you, or if there's items you're just not 100% sure about, please interview the family so that you're not leaving any items blank, and let them provide the information for you to put onto the form. So taking a quick look at the form, we're going to start with the top. This is the date, meaning the date that you complete the form. If you choose to do this on your computer or laptop, a benefit of that is if this is a child that you assess again in the future, then you can pull up the form that you completed the last time, change the date at the top to notify us that you have reviewed the form and updated it. And then please do look through the form if you are updating one, even if you're thinking, yeah, I think everything's the same as it was last time. There are things on this form that do tend to change over time. And so even if you feel like there's nothing that's changed, do take a careful look through it and just make 100% sure you don't want to make any updates. The next part of the form is about the languages and communication used with and by the child. So first question here are, what are the languages used at home with the child? Please check all the languages that might be used at the home. We have a box for English, also for American Sign Language. And then we have a long box for other, where you can type in any other languages that are being used with the child. Then the next question is, take a look at those languages that you just indicated in question 1 and select which one of those languages is used most often in the home. Next, we move on to communication approach. The first 2 items are about the approach used by the adults in the home with the child. The next 2 are about the approach used by the child themselves. So this is the opportunity to say whether the adults are using spoken language only, if they're primarily using spoken language, but maybe occasional signs here and there, maybe during particular events like a bath, or just a handful of specific signs, versus the spoken and sign languages, which indicates that they are trying to sign and speak as much as they can, given their current abilities. And then sign language only is another option. You also have the opportunity, if the family is using cued speech, to check that, or if they're using an AAC device. Same questions are asked again, but now about what does the child themselves use. There's the added option of none yet. That would mean the child might be communicating, maybe through gestures, facial expression, body language, etc., but they're not yet using any formal language. They aren't using any spoken language. They aren't using any formal sign language. And then there's an opportunity to say if the child themselves is using cues or if they are using an AAC device to communicate. Next section is about hearing status and hearing technology. Please indicate whether the child's hearing difference is bilateral or unilateral, and whether they have a diagnosis of auditory neuropathy or not. This would be something probably could be gleaned from the audiology records that you would have for the child, or if you don't have those records or aren't sure about this, this would be a great question for the family. If the family doesn't know what auditory neuropathy is, or isn't sure about this, you could probably safely check no, because for children who don't have this diagnosis, it probably isn't something that would have come up in the audiology visit. Next section, please indicate the child's hearing level. This would be based on an average of the various frequencies, and the average ranges are indicated for each of the levels on the form. If the child has a bilateral hearing difference, please indicate the level in the ear with more sound detection. So if, let's say, one ear is moderate, the other ear is severe, you would check moderate. For cases of unilateral hearing difference, please check the ear that has less sound detection, because the ear with more sound detection wouldn't even have a level here on this form to check. Next is about hearing technology. The note on the right indicates that in this top question, you should check off any technology that the child has, even if they're not using it at this time. And I just want to take a moment to say that when you do fill out the data submission form for the first few times, or if it's been a while since you filled one out, please take a look back at these slides and these notes just to remind yourself of what we're looking for in each of the different sections. So top section is what kind of technology do they have, even if they're no longer using it. Underneath that, you'll be able to indicate amount of use. So the first option is just NA. They don't have any hearing technology. In other words, they never had it. The one with the two asterisks right next to it is none to minimal. That would be situations where the child does have technology, they have received it at some point, either on loan or that they own, but they're not using it at this time, or they're using it so minimally that you don't even feel like you should be checking the 1 to 3 hour a day box. The next question is about any additional conditions or disabilities that the child might have. And here we're asking you to consider, A, do they have any disabilities or conditions? But importantly, B, do those conditions or disabilities, do you feel like they impact the child's language skills? So you're going to say no if either obviously they don't have any disabilities or conditions, or they do have additional conditions, but you don't believe that they're impacting their language development. That might be something like a balance issue, maybe a corrected vision issue. And then, of course, you'll be checking yes if they have additional conditions that you do feel are impacting their language. That would typically be things like cognitive delay, autism spectrum disorder, that they have Down syndrome, charge, etc. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk about this next section of the form, which is about educational supports and services that the child might be receiving.
This is Sarah. Thanks, Allison. So the next part of our data submission form allows you to note the programs and services that the child and or family are receiving or enrolled in. The first box are the programs. So we would ask that you check all that apply here. If a child is enrolled in any dual programs or split day programs, please indicate that here. We also want to make you aware that the term kindergarten is used in a very broad or general sense. The term kindergarten can apply to kindergarten, young fives, transitional kindergarten, developmental kindergarten, or whatever your local school is calling that school age-based programming. The second box indicates what services the child or family is receiving. Again, you have the opportunity to check all that apply. And it's important to note that you can include here services that are provided by your educational agency, as well as services that the family chooses to seek out on their own. Let me give you an example. If through your IFSP, the child is receiving speech and language services, you would indicate that with a checkbox there. However, if this child has also been referred for and the family is seeking outside speech and language pathology services, you would click or check the box Clinical Speech and Language Services. What's neat about both of these boxes, check all that apply, is that these are likely going to be programs and or services that change as the child develops and grows. So, as Allison indicated earlier, when you are updating this form with each data submission, please have a careful eye on this particular section, as we would expect that you're going to have lots of different opportunities to make different selections here.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. So that wraps up the information about the child and family. At the very bottom of the form, we have some information about you. So here is where you'll indicate your name and your contact information in case we have any questions and want to contact you. At the very bottom of the form is a large text box where you can put any notes that you think would be helpful, either to us or any requests that you might have. If you do one of the 7 assessments that we're collecting data on this year and including in the summary report, we will score that for you and write up a narrative report, which we'll send back to you. We typically do that within 2 weeks, but if you need it sooner, this box would be a great place to put that you would like those results rushed back to you and the due date that you need it by. Also, please use this box if you've needed to leave any items blank. Typically, if we see an item is left blank, we'll contact you to ask about it. But if there's a reason for that, either both you and the family can't get the information, or the family does not want to share that particular piece of information, if you can indicate that in this box, then we won't be bothering you or contacting you about the blank item. And then anything else that you think might be useful, feel free to add here if there's anything that puts the results in context. If there's anything that you feel like, on the surface, this might look unusual, but it's really correct. You want to alert us to that. This box is a great place for that sort of information. So now we've talked about informing the family about the data collection efforts in Michigan, the release of information form, the data submission form. Next is the language assessment. The selection of the language assessment rests with each educational team, and you want to select whatever you feel is most appropriate for the child. But for statewide data collection purposes, I have a little caveat to add to that. It's important that you do select an assessment that's designed for the age of the child that you're assessing. So, for example, if you're assessing a child who's 4 years old, please don't select an assessment that tops out at age 3. Reason being is that for the data collection effort, we would need to be able to go to the normative tables to get things like the child's percentile rank, standard score, or whatever information the test provides. And we won't be able to do that if the child is older than the age range that the test is designed for. Now, that's all well and good in the situation where the child's chronological age and their language age are somewhat similar. But what do you do in the circumstance when you have an older child, but who is language delayed and their language is more like a younger child? In that case, please select an assessment that has a broad enough age range that it encompasses both the child's language level, so that there's items on the test that are appropriate for their language level, but also goes out as high as the child's chronologic age so that the normative tables can be utilized. So one example of an assessment that might work in the example I gave is the DAISY. The DAISY covers a broad age range. It goes from 1 month up to 5 years, 11 months of age. So for a 4-year-old child, it's appropriate. Their chronologic age falls in that range. But if they have language that's more similar to a 2-year-old child, the assessment's still appropriate because there are language items that go all the way down to 1 month of age. If you do one of the MacArthur Bates Communicative Development Inventories, which is a personal favorite of mine, that's divided into 3 levels. You should select the level that's right for the child's chronologic age. If you feel like, I would probably get some better or at least additional information if I chose a level that is lower than their chronological age, feel free to do that as well. We're happy to score both of those levels and send you back the results from both. And each will provide different types of information that are both valuable. So now we've talked about all the pieces of the assessment. Let's talk about how you're going to share it with us. So you'll create a folder on a shared drive of your choice. Please call the umbrella folder Lead K Assessment Data Collection. You'll share that umbrella folder with us, and then everything that you put under that we'll have access to. So as we go through the slides, we'll be, in a sense, clicking on the previous folder, and you'll see what's within that folder. So within the Lead K Data Collection folder, if you were to click on that, you'd want to set up folders for each of the children that you're going to assess. And you can just do this as you're doing the assessments. You don't have to ahead of time make a folder for everybody. Or if it helps with your organizational process, feel free to get the folders organized. A number of people have done that right after the presentation, just while everything's fresh in their mind, just to get their structure set up. So label those folders in some way that indicates which child they're for. So it could be the child's initials, their first name, last initial, first two letters of their first name, etc. So each child will have an individual folder. When you click on that child's folder, then you'll set up a folder with the date of the evaluation or the month and year of the evaluation. So if you were to assess a child today, you would set up a folder that says January 2026. Over time, you would be adding additional folders since you don't necessarily know now what subsequent assessments they'll be doing. You can just create this folder as you have an assessment completed. Then when you go into the dated folder, this is where you're going to put the forms that you completed. So minimally, you'll always have 3 forms in the folder: the release form, a completed assessment protocol, and the data submission form. You're welcome to do more than one assessment. If you want to do a battery, that's fantastic. And you can just upload all of those into the folder as well. So with this data folder where you're going to put everything, you'll have that release of information form that can either be completed on your computer or tablet or printed, completed by hand, and then scanned and put into the folder. Likewise with the data submission form. And then the assessment protocols, if you choose to do the DAISY or the MacArthur-Bates Communicative Development Inventories, please use our fillable forms that are available on the website where you downloaded this recording. Once you've uploaded all of the forms to the folder and everything's ready for us, be sure that you've shared that umbrella folder with us, elo@colorado.edu. Please share it so that we are editors of the folder. The reason for that is that we'll be uploading the child's results to the folder, and we'll only be able to do that if we have editor status. Once you have uploaded the forms and everything's ready to go, send us a quick email at elo@colorado.edu. This email address is on the data submission form, so you'll have it handy every time you do an assessment. And when you email us, just send us a quick note saying an assessment's ready for us, and then copy and paste the link to the folder where everything resides so that we can get right to it. If you do send in one or more of the 7 assessments that we'll be including in the annual report this year, we will score that assessment for you and we'll send you back a child summary report within 2 weeks. If you choose to do one of the other 4 assessments that's part of the 11 recommended by the Lead K Advisory Board, please also submit that, and we will be tracking the assessments we receive so that as part of the report, we will know how many assessments have been completed, how many of each type, and that will help guide us as to which data fields we should be building next if we see that there's a particular assessment that's being widely used that we don't have infrastructure for yet. And then once we do build those fields, we'll be able to backfill them with your child's information. So those 4 assessments are not going to be going into a deep, dark hole. They are useful to us. So please, any of the 11 assessments that you do, include in that shared folder. If you do send the DAISY 2 or the MacArthur-Bates Communicative Development Inventory, we will send you an additional summary sheet that I'm going to show you in just a moment. But before I do that, I just want to again emphasize that it would be highly desirable for us if you would use our fillable forms that are available on the website where you got this recording. If you do use them, please complete them in Adobe Acrobat. The Reader program is free, and the link is here if you don't happen to have it on your computer already. Or if you have the proprietary Adobe Pro, that works equally well. By using our fillable forms and completing them in Adobe, this allows us to utilize automated scoring and data entry programs. That increases accuracy and also the speed with which we can get results back to you. So let's take a look at the summary sheets I mentioned. If you do the DAISY 2, in addition to the narrative report, you'll get back this graphic display that shows the child's levels in each of the different subdomains. If you choose to only do some of the subdomains, some of these bars will be missing, but if you do the whole battery, you'll get the nice colorful rainbow. It lists the domain on the left-hand side, so cognitive, receptive language, etc. There's a vertical gray bar in the middle, and that's the average range. So you can quickly see at a glance which bars fall within the average range, which might be above the average range, and in which areas the child might be below the average range in a quick glance. So we can see for this example, in the adaptive behavior section, so the yellow bar, this child is just slightly above the average range. Whereas in the gross motor section, which is in the middle, the light green bar, they're just slightly below the average range. All of the other areas are in the lower end of the average range. If you choose to do the MacArthur, the additional piece of information in addition to the narrative report will be in a table format. So our fillable forms were adapted with the publisher's permission to indicate whether a child says a particular word or whether they sign it. So we're able to get a separate count for how many words a child could produce in spoken language, sign language, or in both spoken and sign language. The table also will give you information about the yes/no questions on the MacArthur, such as things like, does the child talk about the past? In this example, the child does not, but we can see from the percentage that a high percentage of children that are the same age as this child do talk about the past. This will help you to know if your child is on track and to help guide next steps for the child. So, getting ready for our next steps. Again, all of the forms are located on the website where you accessed this recording. That may have been the LEAD K, Michigan Parent Resource website, or the Department of Education RDHH website. There you'll find the letter to parents that explains the value of assessments and submitting their child's results, the release of information form, the data submission form, and fillable versions of the DAISY and the MacArthur that we hope you'll use if you choose one of those two assessments. So next steps, feel free to set up those shared folders that I talked about. Please refer back to these slides to look at the structure of how to set that up. Talk with your parents about this effort in Michigan. Secure necessary permissions, in other words, the release of information form. Feel free to complete the assessments at any point in time. Upload the documents when you're ready and everything's set. Send us a quick email to let us know they're there. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, about assessment in general, or about Michigan's efforts to collect language outcome data, please contact Elizabeth Flores. Here is her email address and her phone number. And thank you for watching our recording today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.